Welcome to Riverbend Talent on WBGZ. Brought to you by the Halpin Music Company.
Another Thursday night in the Riverbend, another Riverbend Talent on the Big Z, brought to you by the Halpin Music Company and by Mr. Matt Van Vorst of Macias Insurance of the Stubblefield Band. He loves Mr. Donuts. Mainly, Matt likes to give his advertising away, so he'd rather me talk about his friends' businesses than him, but what a great guy. What's going on? Already, you know, the Sea Shanty Sing-Along underway down at Morrison's Irish Pub. They'll go until 9 o'clock. We got open mic later tonight at the Raging Cajun in Alton. Starts at 9 or 10-ish, whenever they get it going. Step Brothers from 6 to 10 at Fast Eddie's in Alton. We got Scott Ferris of Midwest Avenue playing out at the Bethalto Spirits Music in the Park. 7 o'clock start there. Cricket and the Grilled Avocados, they're up at the Grafton Music in the Park. They go from 7 until 9. Kevin Gruen already underway up at George's Pub and Grill in Jerseyville. He goes till 9 o'clock. Got the Money Shot Acoustic underway at Wiggler's and Holiday Shores in Edwardsville, 6 until 10. Chris Salgado playing at the Wild E Theater, starting at 7:30 tonight. Open mic at Big Daddy's in Edwardsville, and who's going to host an open mic? None other than Butch Moore. He does it all the time, and that's from 6 to 9 at Big Daddy's in Edwardsville. Josh Witt going to team up with Gavin Kolp, and they'll be doing Deutz Village Inn and Pontoon Beach from 7 to 11. Rewind starts at 6:30, goes till 9:30 at the Speakeasy in Granite City. Dustin Coleman, 7 to 10 at Pavia's Place in Granite City tonight. Open mic with Toxic Johnny down there at the Old Herald Brewery in Collinsville. Great venue there. They go from 6:30 to 9:30. Matt Tall already underway out at the Prairie Inn in Dorsey. He goes until 8:30 tonight. Matt Tall, of course, a member of the Stubblefield Band, right alongside with our sponsor, Matt Van Vorst. And, of course, every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, they have a festival in Belleville. They call it Experience Live Music Row. All the venues get together, and they share a sponsor to get the word out for all the bands. And that happens, like I said, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Tonight we are going to talk about August 31st, right here in Alton at the Amphitheater, the Alton Jazz and Wine Fest. And I happen to be lucky enough to have the headliner for that event joining me tonight, Jim Manley. How you doing tonight, Jim?
Doing great.
Great to have you on the show. And JimManleyMusic.com if you want to get ahead of the game and find out stuff about Jim before we get to talk to him. Get right on that website and check it out. He's been putting out records since 1991. He is the headliner for the Alton Jazz and Wine Fest, and that's taking place, as I mentioned, at the Amphitheater, August 31st. The gates open at 6 o'clock, and we'll go through all the tickets and the lineup for that event. But first, we're going to get to know Jim Manley a little bit. And so you made the trek over here from where tonight?
Well, mid-St. Louis, Richmond Heights, Maplewood area.
Uh-huh.
Oh, man. What a trip. I had to pack a lunch.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks Alton's so far from St. Louis, and it's 35 minutes.
Right. We talked briefly right before we came on air about crossing that river. There's something about it that just terrifies people. And
it's true.
You know what it is. The home of rock and roll's on this side of the river, and, you know, they think it's on that side of the river, Jim, and I don't know, maybe there's a little competition going on.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of trumpets, we can go right to Miles Davis and talk about a little competition of where he's actually from and what he's all about, because, you know, Alton likes to claim Miles Davis is from here, and you were actually part of the dedication of the statue.
Yeah, a few years ago. As a matter of fact, when you brought that up, I remembered that I also played the party they had for the committee and the guy that did the sculpture. It was his first visit. He hadn't done the statue yet. He had pictures and drawings of it, but it was a private party. I think maybe it was a fundraiser. I couldn't even tell you where it was, but it was up high somewhere over here. And so I met the artist who did the sculpture before it was ever done. And then the day that they dedicated it to it, they had a famous trumpet player who actually was one of my teachers, Bobby Shue, from L.A., come in and play as the headliner. And then at each of the little bars, there were different trumpet players from all over the area.
Isn't
it was
that
pretty
cool?
pretty neat evening.
Yeah. And just so, we claim Miles Davis's home is here, and it is a fact that he was born right here in Alton, Illinois, but he moved away at a pretty young age and into East St. Louis, which, we claim here on the station as the home of rock and roll.
Yeah.
And so how about Miles for you? You've been playing for 40 years. Did you ever get a chance to see Miles Davis?
I never saw him live, but I will tell you an interesting story about that. I used to go after gigs when I was younger and hung out all night. I would go over to the east side at some of those jazz clubs. There was a Celebrity Room. That's the one I remember. I can't remember the name of some of the others. It slips my mind. But this particular room had a fellow named Roland Clark that played tenor sax. And he had been a very well-known jazz guy in this area. I think he was from Redbud, maybe, or somewhere in that area. But he had a set over there from 1 to 5, and I would drag all these people over to the Celebrity Room after our pop gigs,
right.
rock gigs, whatever you wanted to call them. And I had no business being there playing. Honest to God, I had no business being there playing. I didn't even know what I was doing. But I could kind of play high notes, so they liked that. There was a fella famous for that named Maynard Ferguson, who's a great trumpet player, and he was kind of my idol growing up. And so they would have me come up, and Roland would say, get on up there, and play some high notes. But one night I'm sitting at the side of the stage, and everybody in this club is dressed like it's Hollywood. I mean, everybody's dressed up, and everybody's cool. There wasn't a bad scene in the place. And I'm sitting there, and I look over in the corner, and I swear Miles Davis is in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, my God. And I'm tugging Roland's coat going, man, is that Miles Davis?
Mm.
And he punked me a little bit and said, yeah, man, he's here to hear you play. Well, then you imagine I'm beyond nervous thinking about that. As it ended up, it was Miles' brother. I believe his name was Nathan. I'm not exactly sure if that's the right name. But they looked pretty much identical.
Right.
But he went along with the joke for quite a while. My heart's beating, And actually, I ended up meeting his brother, and he was a really nice guy who said to me, my brother loves Maynard Ferguson, and you sound just like him.
Oh, wow.
And Maynard and Miles used to split sets at Birdland, like in 58, 59.
Right.
So I became close friends with my hero, who was Maynard, because he was personal management, was based in St. Louis for many years. And he told me a few Miles stories that a few I couldn't tell on the air, but it was an interesting relationship between the two,
Well, it's interesting to think that both of them come from here.
Well,
because Maynard made a pretty good name for himself.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maynard was from Canada originally.
Right.
But he was a kid and just happened to be a star in Stan Kenton's band. But he had a career all the way through. He literally recorded an album like 2 weeks before he passed away. He was on the road. He was a road rat.
So did he spend some time in St. Louis? Because I know you opened up for him at one point.
I did open up for him. I can't remember the year, probably 96, somewhere in that ballpark. And he actually came and sat in with a couple of my bands when he was in town. His personal manager was a fellow named Steve Shankman, who owns Contemporary Productions in St. Louis, and you might know that name, and owned Riverport at one time. And he was he happens to be a trumpet player also, and he loved Maynard like most of us that grew up in the 70s. Maynard was a rock star for us, And so Maynard was in town a lot just because Steve loved having him around, but the thing was, Maynard would go into the office where they're trying to get work done, and being Maynard, by this time he's an older gentleman, and he's telling all these stories from the 50s and 60s, and nobody can get any work done.
Oh, yeah.
So Steve would call me and go, can you get him out of here? And I'm thinking, I'm busy today, It's Maynard.
Right.
So we formed a friendship from that. And then, I did open for him, and I used to travel around the country and see him. I mean, I loved this guy. He was not only a fantastic trumpet player, he was probably the most positive person I'd ever met. And he treated everyone with respect, and he was just a good person and always liked to have fun. And I always carried that with me in my own bands. If we're not having fun, boy, there's hardly a point to doing this.
So I'm sitting here imagining the conversation between Miles and Mr. Ferguson, and
Oh yeah, there's some conversations that we couldn't speak of over the air. But
right, but obviously some St. Louis mentions in there.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And, it's just so interesting how much talent comes out of this area.
It's crazy, man. Just in my high school alone, almost a good batch of the trumpet players that came from my high school, which is the early 70s, ended up playing for a living or played as a part-time musician. A lot of trumpet players came out of that high school. There was one fella, sadly passed away a few years ago, Frank Gessler, who played with Bob Cuban, I think, for like 35 years.
Mm-hmm. And so let's go back to your beginnings as a trumpet player. Was that your first instrument? Did you get in like school bands, or how did it all come up?
Yeah, my parents, there were 9 kids in my family, and my parents, nobody was musical. There wasn't any music, but they played records, And there was always a piano there. I don't know why there was a piano there, because nobody could play. But I remember tinkering around on the piano, and then like most of the people of my generation, they had bands in the public schools. And they came around one day and laid these instruments out and said, does anybody want to play this? Well, my brothers were all kind of sports people. And if you remember when you were a kid and they had that wiffle ball with that red bat that was about this thick, I couldn't hit the ball with that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so when they brought instruments around, I thought, maybe I can do that.
We called that the Fat Albert bat.
Yeah, that's
because Fat Albert was pretty popular in the 70s, and it just looked like something he would use to us. You know what I mean?
You're right. I mean, it was pretty sad when I look back at it. I couldn't hit the ball with that bat. So they came around, and I was in 7th grade, and I said, what instruments that Herb Alpert guy play? Herb Alpert and T&R Brass. My parents had those records, and that'd be a trumpet. And I said, well, I want to play that. I really didn't even know what it was, but that's how it started anyway.
Okay, well, you're going to have to teach me a little bit about jazz. My memory of Herb Alpert was that he was mainstream, almost commercial trumpet player for his time.
I mean, the thing about jazz is such a wide umbrella. Some people will say that's not jazz, and maybe it's not. It's just a wide umbrella of music. Jazz, it just covers so many things. Somebody will think, well, Miles is jazz and this guy isn't, and that. I don't know. Herb Alpert was a more popular music. He had an incredible ear for making a song sound good and be appealing to the mass public. It's nothing brain-wise he did. He just had that ability to do that. And think about, this guy had 4 albums at one time in the top 10.
I know.
That's insane.
Instrumental albums. Which is really insane because, I mean, we talk to musicians every week on this show, and just writing a hooky lyric is very difficult.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have the choice of writing a hooky lyric with the trumpet, right? You've got to come up with this melody, right?
Well, he had a partner named Jerry Moss, and that's A&M Records, which... How many people are on A&M Records? You can talk about rock history or any history.
Right.
This is a huge label. Herb was the artist. Jerry Moss was the business guy. And he got the idea right away with some of these catchy tunes that they could be licensed on things like the Dating Game and T-Berry Shuffle for the T-Berry Gum. And that's where the money was.
I see.
So it was Jerry Moss that really took that to another level. It was just funny how it just was the right time, the right place. And amazingly, Herb Alpert is still touring with his wife, Lanny Hall, who was part of Sergio Mendes, still touring, obviously not for the money. The man is very, very wealthy. And he gives a lot of money back to things, musicians' causes and everything. So it's funny because you could have the worst day in your life. If you're a product of any of the 60s or 70s, and you could be having the worst day in your life, and you put on an old Herb Alpert record, and I would bet you cannot help smile. It was just happy music.
It's amazing how much music come from the 60s and 70s that has influenced everything that's still happening today.
Absolutely.
And how much the music industry has changed over that time. Back then, it was a big deal to go out and buy a record,
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you saved all week long waiting for that thing to come out. You'd heard about it and maybe a mention somewhere in a magazine.
Yeah.
You didn't, in Herb Albert's case, maybe heard a song on the radio, but most trumpet guys, when you said trumpet for popular music, they might think Chicago.
Chicago.
Right.
I grew up with Chicago. I grew up with Herb Alpert first. Then I heard Al Hurt, who was also these two people were in the top 20 on the radio. I mean, it's hard to envision a trumpet player having a hit on the radio, but that's what the era was. And so I was pretty young in 67. I was 13. But the 70s, up until about 77 or 78, it was a totally different business. It was about the artist. It wasn't about how much money can we make, and especially Herb Alpert's studio. The artist had pretty much free reign, and that was their plan.
Interesting.
Joe Cocker's on that label. There's so many people on that label. Groups like you said, Chicago, still touring.
Right.
And what do people want to hear? They want to hear the music off the first three records.
Exactly. So let's get back to how you got into playing trumpet. You said you picked it out of what you said, 11 years old when you did that?
13, and they brought a thing in it, and it's kind of funny because I just fell in love with it right away because I had nothing else to do really, and I just learned songs by ear from the records and stuff. I really didn't have a lot of formal training, even up to when I got in high school. And then in high school, the band director retired, and I was just absolutely blessed to have a guy who became my teacher, and his name was Ed Levinsky. And he was like me as an adult. He was a trumpet geek. I mean, he was only probably in his mid-40s at this point, but to me he looked like an old guy, but he was just wonderful. And my senior year I had 2 free classes where I didn't have to do geometry or any of that stuff that I had no interest in.
Right.
He happened to run a record business out of his basement, mail order record business.
Wow.
It sounds so dated now.
Yeah.
Well, it was, but it was a big business for him because he was living on a teacher's salary, and for 2 hours every day, Monday through Friday, he would bring a new record in of some kind of trumpet playing or big band or something. And there it was. That was my college of music. This wonderful band director, which I told you already that so many of the trumpet players from those classes stayed playing.
Right.
And that's where I got to hear everybody.
Right. And I want to get back to that because I know my mother's listening, right? And in 1975, her son graduated from Civic Memorial High School. He was a trumpet player, although it was a cornet that he played.
Yeah, cornet. We always started on that.
Most people just thought it was the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyways, he won a scholarship to SIU Carbondale.
I'll be darned.
To play. And, you're telling me how much competition there was out there as trumpet players.
Yeah.
If all these guys are coming out at the same time.
Right.
It kind of puts a little star on what he accomplished there. It was a bigger deal than I realized, maybe.
It was huge. I mean, trumpets in the 70s, they were the kings. There were no saxophone players. There was no David Sandbarn. There was none of that. There was none of these people. Trumpets were the king. You had all these trumpet players, all these guys in Chicago, blood, sweat, and tears. Bill Chase had a group called Chase with 4 trumpets and a rock band. They had a big hit called Get It On in about 1969. I mean, this was if you tried to do that today, people would say, are you out of your mind?
For real. Now everybody wants to look sexy with an electric guitar, right?
Well, I understand. I don't know how sexy you can look with a trumpet, but there is that, I guess.
Yeah. So interesting, though, to think, a different time once again, and, the horns were a big deal, but as we talk about this, I start thinking about R&B. I start thinking about right back here to East St. Louis.
Yeah.
Here we go again with Ike and Tina Turner.
Absolutely.
Did they use horns? Some of them R&B bands.
All those R&B bands had horns. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the same players on a lot of those recordings.
Mm-hmm.
When I came back from college, I played that Imperial Room with a blues band. The band leader was named Reuben McCall. He had 4 horns. 2 trumpets, sax, and a trombone. And that was towards the end of that Imperial Room, George Edick and all that. But I remember the owner telling me about Ike and Tina Turner starting there, and it was pretty bad shape when there. But there was all that little part of history you don't think about until you just mentioned it. Yeah.
Well, the reason I really turned my head toward Ike and Tina was we had Bonnie Bramlett on, who's Delaney and Bonnie, right? She was born right here in Alton.
Yeah.
Grew up in Granite City and was an Ikeette for like a week. And they couldn't keep her in the band because they weren't allowed to cross state lines with a white girl in a car.
We're talking about a different time.
Exactly. But I'm thinking back once again to the history of rock and roll and Johnny Johnson, who was in a jazz quartet when he invited Chuck Berry up on stage in the mid-'50s.
Yeah.
So totally different time for music.
Yeah.
And then, you're talking mid-'70s here later when disco was huge. And listen to disco and tell me what's the main instruments. It's brass.
Right.
It's brass. Either that or keyboards covering brass.
Yeah. A lot of brass in the disco music. And ironically, the disco music helped my hero Maynard. He came out. He was recording for Columbia Records, and Bob James, who's a fantastic jazz pianist on his own right, happened to be a producer, and he heard the theme to Rocky before the movie came out, and they bumped a song they had on one of Maynard's albums and put the theme from Rocky, and this became a top 10 hit. 76, somewhere around there, 77?
Yeah.
Became a top 10 hit and carried Maynard through the rest of his career.
I'm trying to think of a bigger trumpet song in the history of the world than the Rocky theme song.
Well, you had Feels So Good by Chuck Mangione. That was a pretty big one.
That was a good one.
And you know why? It was on A&M Records, Herb Alpert. Herb Alpert put a lot of money behind that thing.
His trumpet looked different, though. It confused me.
Yes.
He had the big tube that came down.
It's called a flugelhorn.
Okay.
And a flugelhorn, it's been around a long time. Even Miles everybody played a little flugelhorn. It's just a more mellow instrument, a lot more mellow than the trumpet. I mean, if you want to talk about the polar opposites, Chuck Mangione and Maynard would be polar opposites.
Right.
Maynard was very brassy, and Chuck was very a more pleasing sound on the flugelhorn.
Well, it's kind of like jazz in general. It's all over the place, right?
As we talked earlier, it's
you
such a big umbrella. I mean,
Dixie, you got,
everything.
Improvisational, you got
big bands.
I mean, you listen to Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, and you're like, what is this?
Well, when Miles got bored of what he's most famous for, the Kind of Blue album, still the #1 selling jazz album in the world. He recorded that in 1959. I mean, people still talk about this record.
Exactly.
But Miles, he was bored. He hated it. He's like, man, he saw Jimi Hendrix and goes, that's what I want to do.
Exactly.
I want my trumpet to be electrified. And when he came out with stuff like Bitches Brew, the people that loved the Miles of the early 60s were like, ugh.
Yeah.
But it didn't bother him. He said, I'm going forward. And to take another point, even after all that area, and then he quit for a long time, he comes back. He sticks what is a mute on the end of a trumpet, and it happens to be called a Harmon mute. It's kind of a metal sound. And he's literally playing on albums with this Harmon mute and changing the sound again in the 80s.
Right.
It's just unbelievable that most musicians find one way of playing, and that's how they play, especially jazz guys. I mean, Count Basie always sounds like Count Basie. Miles, other than his adventures, early Miles, so many trumpet players try to sound like that early Miles thing. But Miles was bored. Man, I want to sound like Jimi Hendrix on the trumpet.
It's interesting that you bring that up because you talked about how the music industry back then, the musicians had a little more say, right? So, these guys that kind of played the same way on each release decided themselves they wanted to continue to make money, so this is what is making me money. And then you had guys who were totally on the improvisational side that were like, let's break down walls. Let's do things that have not been done on an instrument. And you brought up Jimi Hendrix, and he may be the first guitar player that I can remember that broke down the walls like he did.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because he wanted to play with Miles. is what the story is. And
Yeah.
the record labels were like, there's no way we're doing a Miles Davis, Jimi Hendrix record now. Could you imagine what that would have sounded
Oh,
like?
my God. You know, Miles probably could have got that done. He was so powerful by that time at Columbia Records. He could, I mean, I heard a story that he sent, I don't know if it was Bitches Brew, but one of those records, he sent it to Tio Mocera, who was producing all this stuff. And they were like, oh, what are we going to do with this? You know? But his name, even by that point, was so powerful.
Right.
You know, you don't have that so much today. Especially in jazz, I don't think you have it as much.
Right. You know, and part of what a lot of people led to Jimi Hendrix's depression was the fact that they wanted him to keep playing Purple Haze, and he was done with Purple Haze. He wanted to move on and
move on.
And just like Miles, and, you know, highly influenced by Miles and saying, you know, hey, I can take this guitar to new heights.
Yeah.
And he'd already done that in most of our minds.
Right.
But could you imagine if they allowed it? And so you're looking at two different sides of the music industry there. One that's allowing it and one that's not allowing it. And I guess it mattered what label you were on.
Well, you know, and exactly what you said. This was the biggest label in the world at the time, Columbia Records.
Right.
But they were from the past. They would have never considered it. I mean, it was such a melting pot from the late 60s up until the disco era. It was a really huge melting pot. I mean, the music that came out of Steely Dan. So much jazz cordage in their tunes, you know, but they're pop. It's a pop band.
Another guy from this area, Michael McDonald, right? And I'm going to bring up another one since you brought up, you know, rock and roll. Mama's Pride.
Yeah,
with the Liston brothers, and you know, they were told that they were able to take the horn sound and play it on guitars, and you know. With rock instruments, but they were using horn lines, and Pat has told me this himself, that they were basing it on horn lines.
Yeah. Well, Pat, here we go. You know, bouncing back to history, down on the Landing, I had a band called Fantasy. It started at Boomers. I would say the year would be about 81 or so. And there was another band called Street Corner Symphony. We played at Boomers on the Landing, and they played at Bogart's, or maybe it was Kennedy's to start with. I can't remember. But the Sunday jam at Bogart's with Street Corner Symphony became so popular. All these musicians would come through. So Pat would be there, and I'd be there with my horn, and we met there. And I knew who Mama's Pride was, but I didn't really know the history, you know, at the time. But those were some fun times hanging out there.
Yeah. So it's an amazing area that we live in, and you know, I can't help but imagine back to when before there were even what we call cities here, and go back to these ancient mounds and these people. They were probably playing music with some type of instrument that was like a trumpet, and you know, a flute or something to that effect. And I mean, I think it's ingrained in where we're at. There's something special about this area.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I mean, look, we have famous trumpet players. Not only Miles Davis, St. Louis, Clark Terry, probably one of the greatest of all-time jazz players ever. Right from my South City, St. Louis.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
unbelievable. Hey, we're talking to Jim Manley. Check him out at jimmanleymusic.com. He is the headliner for the Alton Jazz and Wine Fest. It's coming up August 31st. The gates are going to open at 6. They're going to have the Alton Jazz Confluence at 6:30. Then they're going to have a group called Left of West at 7:15. And then Jim will follow at 8:45. General admission tickets are $10. There's a $3.50 fee on that. So keep that in mind when you're going to get tickets. Or you can get a $25 ticket that's either a 2-top or a 4-top table. Now, that had a $5.50 fee on it, and you must purchase enough to fill the table. So if you're on a 2-top, you need to get 2 people to go. If you're on a 4, you get 4 people to go. The other price that you can add on to that is a $5 VIP parking. And if you were down there for Mississippi River Fest, that extra $5 might come in handy, because parking was a difficult thing down there. And now we got Jim Manley playing down there at this one, so we know the place is going to be packed.
Well, we're hoping it will be. And I think those tables, some of those tables are actually on the side of the stage, if I know, right? Yeah. Pretty cool setup.
Yeah. And we didn't even mention the wine.
Yeah, we got to mention that wine.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
My guys will be partaking in some of that wine.
Oh, yeah. And, while we were talking about improvisation and that type of thing, I'm missing my partner in action here again this week, Pigpen. And, it's 3 weeks now since he's been here. The rumors are flying that I fired him, which I would have every right to do. I mean, there's plenty of reasons I could fire that guy. But, his favorite band's the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
And they are known for improvisation. And I
Absolutely.
can't help but think, I know bluegrass was a big part of their roots, but I guarantee jazz was in there too.
Yeah. Well, there was a guy that played keys and trumpet with the Grateful Dead. I saw some videos of him.
Yeah.
I had a good friend of mine. It was a manager of one of the restaurants I played for years, Jimmy's on the Park, and he was the biggest Grateful Dead guy in history. I mean, he had so many live recordings. Now listen what they did here, and listen what they did here. He was that was his thing, man. The Grateful Dead.
Yeah, and still popular today as well. But I love the idea that 60s, 70s music creating all this different type of thing, the R&B, the jazz.
Yeah.
And it, a lot of it blues based. And we talk constantly on this show about how St. Louis was a stopping point for the guys coming from the South on their way to Chicago. And they liked St. Louis because they got a meal when they were here and a little bit of money, which didn't happen all the way up that river, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
right.
Some of them didn't leave here once they got here, and there's a whole list of blues guys we could start naming.
I mean, look, St. Louis Blues Club. I mean, it's a big thing. People say St. Louis is known for jazz. I said probably more blues than jazz.
Yeah.
It shares. There's a share there, but blues is extremely popular and a big part of jazz.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Lots of horns and blues.
Yeah.
And, and once again, what is jazz actually? I mean, couldn't you just lump it all and say it's all really jazz?
Well, you could. Yeah, you probably could, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have to have a chart for it to be jazz? No.
You're better
Right?
off without a chart.
A lot of people might think that, but not necessarily, right? You just mentioned that you when you started, you just tinkered with it and tried to figure out how to play that way. You weren't reading music, were you?
I think my dad bought me a horn, maybe a trumpet, my second or third year of playing, and there was a fella at Gravois Music named Ray. I remember his name, and he taught all the instruments. And I think I had like 3 lessons with him. And then the rest was just until the aforementioned Ed Levinsky, my band director, he kind of took me under his wing and straightened me out a little bit on some things.
Okay.
But otherwise, I've just played with records, and if I heard something I liked, I tried to mimic it.
So has it always been trumpet? But I think you play other brass too, don't you?
I play a little bit of piano, not enough that if you asked me to sit down and play something, it would sound horrible.
Right.
But I do a lot of keyboard playing on my recordings because most of my recordings I'm doing at home.
Okay.
And then I double also on a valve trombone, mainly on section parts.
Need a little bass, right?
Yeah, well, a little bottom. Yeah, a little bottom to the trumpet end. Yes,
I call it bass. I mean, it's called trombone.
Well, actually, trombone, and it can be qualified as a bass trumpet. The instrument I have, it's a marching trumpet. It's not an actual trombone with a slide. It has valves.
Right.
Because that slide thing, man, forget it.
Okay.
That's too confusing. to
It
me.
is very confusing.
I got the 3 buttons. I know how they work. That 7-position thing, not for me.
One thing we haven't mentioned that you do is you do lessons, right?
Yes, I do a lot of Zoom lessons. Not so much beginners. I think I've never actually taught a beginner.
Okay.
I have taught some high school people and some college people or people headed to college, but most of the time it's people that are having maybe having what they call chop problems. The trumpet's just not behaving, which is quite common with the trumpet as opposed to a lot of instruments. Or somebody that played trumpet when they were young and it was just never easy for them, and now maybe they did something else the rest of their life, they're retired, and they'll come for lessons.
Okay, so you're the guy they go to when they're ready to step up their game.
Well, you could put it that way, yeah. I don't think of it in those terms, but over the years I've discovered some things about the instrument itself, yes, and I can help people that are having problems with it.
So has your career been mainly school hard knocks, or did you go on past high school and take some education with
Well, I did go to college in Cape Girardeau, Southeast Missouri State. At the time, I really had no business. I went right from high school to there, and the trumpet teacher there was from Eastman School of Music, and it was, of course, all classical. And he was a very fine trumpet player and a really good teacher, but I had no business being there. And I was going to be a band director, and after about 2.5 years, I thought, this isn't for me. And this is kind of an ironic story that years later, I went back to Cape and played with this pop band I had called Fantasy. I had that band for 35 years. It was one of the top bands in St. Louis. It did weddings. It was a very popular band.
Fast Eddies?
We did Fast Eddies
Right.
for a long time.
Yeah.
And we had a gal who still came back to St. Louis now. Her name's Leslie Craig. She still plays around town.
Okay.
But when she was in the band, she was very, very young. And I think she had only done theater, and we lost our singer. And the bass player said, let's bring this girl in. Well, we had never heard anything. This little gal sounded like Aretha Franklin. And she ended up going on Star Search, which was the forerunner to whatever those shows are now.
Right.
America's Got Talent. With
We
that
had a
McMahon.
Star Search winner on last week.
She came in second.
Okay.
She came in second, but it just catapulted that band to a lot of private parties and a lot of weddings things. And I forgot totally where I was going with the story. I forgot what you asked me, but man, I don't know where it went.
Yeah.
I don't know where it went.
Right. Well, I'm with you, man. I kind of lost track with where we were going.
You said
there
did I
too.
go to school?
Oh, yeah, that's right, college.
So with that band, I revisited my college town, Cape Girardeau, and I played in the club up there. Well, the trumpet teacher, Robert Ressemeyer, was still there, and he came to the club, and he couldn't believe it was the same guy that he taught. And I'll never forget this conversation. I sat with him, and we were always friends. I just was not one of his, prized students. And he introduced me to his daughter. He goes, this is the worst student I've ever had. I said, that year? He goes, ever. And we ended up the next day hanging out at his house because I'd become so frustrated with the trumpet. I wasn't a natural. There's some people that pick up the trumpet and they can just play it. It's easy for them. I wasn't one of those guys, but I was just determined to try to understand how to get to that level. So that was kind of a fun thing that happened.
So move on to the rock band, right? Fantasy, did you say was the name of that? And
Fantasy.
Way more girls now, right?
What's that?
Way more girls in those audiences, right? I mean, that's what drives a lot of us musicians. I'm just saying.
That's right. I mean, that band was really popular. We started at Boomers on the Landing when Kennedy's was the club to be at. And at that time, this would be the early 80s, you had Al Jarreau and all these kind of hip things happening in music again. And we had a singer who is well known in St. Louis now, Charles Glenn, as the singer for the St. Louis Blues. And he was our singer, so we could get by with murder.
Oh, wow.
And we were doing pop tunes that were pretty difficult at the time. It wasn't necessarily all for dancing even then. And that band ran for a long time, 35 years.
Yeah. A lot of Fast Eddie's gigs, though, huh?
A lot. I think we were at Fast Eddie's for, I wish I knew the number, but I know it's over 15.
Okay. Yeah. Now, was that in the 80s that you played there? Or
that would be all the
70s?
way into probably about 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah. So way back on Fast Eddie's, were they always known for their food there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You always
Those
waited in between tunes. Number 319, your food order's ready. Yes.
Yeah, and that's why that's a legendary place. We're talking to Jim Manley, JimManleyMusic.com. If you're wanting to step up your game on the trumpet, he's got his lessons available there. But the main reason we're talking to him is he's the headliner for the Alton Jazz and Wine Fest taking place August 31st right here at the Alton Amphitheater. Only $10 for general admission, and there's a $3.50 fee on that, so you can get your tickets at Ticketmaster, I believe, is where you can get your tickets for that. I want to take a minute, and a lot of bands send me and requests to announce some of their shows,
Sure.
Jim. So I want to take a minute to go over some shows that are going down this weekend. On Friday night, We got Cole Allen playing at the Flock Food Truck Lot from 6 until 9. And we also have Trinity's Way open mic at Mavis Coffee in the Old Milton School, 6 to 9. We'll see if maybe a trumpet player shows up there. You know, they're always welcome. And we love Trinity's Way because Trinity was a young girl who passed away at a young age. And she's really into music festivals and keeping things pretty. So Trinity's Way, they go out, they clean up our area. They go up, pick up trash, you know, and keep things looking nice in her name. And so, you know, and then they get together on these open mics. They also do a festival once a year, and it helps them to get volunteers together and go out and clean up our area. So we love to support Trinity's Way. Also going on Friday night, Mila Dumpy down at Morrison's Irish Pub from 6 to 9. At Fast Eddie's, it's going to be borderline, a little country going down from 7 to 11. And they'll have the array duo from 2 to 6. You got Everhart and Light at the VFW at 7, the Porch Cafe, 7 to 11 at Baker's Hale and Godfrey. Nate Sickmeyer will be out at the Grip and Sip Golf in Cottage Hills from 7 to 10. Ryan Holting at the Brick House in Bethalto from 7 to 10. And Mike Sonderegger at the Moose in Wood River from 7 to 10. Got Rock the Block with Tanglefoot going down in Jerseyville at the Center Plaza this time from 6 until 9. Andrew Dahl at George's Pub and Grill right there in Jerseyville as well from 6 to 9. Cabin Fever up at Grafton Pub from 7 to 11. And Catfish Willie at the Bloody Bucket Saloon in Grafton from 7 to 10. Bob Gilda at the Aries Resort in Grafton from 3 to 7. And down in Pontoon Beach, Dr. Martin's Flannel Brigade will be doing the 90s rock from 8:30 to 12:30 down there in Pontoon Beach and Granite City. And that's just part of what goes on Friday night. There's all kinds of stuff that I have yet to get to on Friday night, and you can follow that list at cottonmouth.org. That's where we keep this complete list. I'm not even halfway through Friday night, just to give you an idea. Just barely starting to scrape the surface of Edwardsville, which at the Wildy Theater on Friday is going to have the classic rock experience. So you can probably imagine what that's going to be about. 8 o'clock at the Wildy Theater, Rock Bottom down, or right across the parking lot, I should have said. From the Wildy, they'll start at 9 o'clock at Backstage. That's formerly the Back Bar in Edwardsville. Scott and Michelle around the corner at Big Daddy's in Edwardsville. And they got Eric Barnes and Jesse Urban doing the happy hour at the Stagger Inn again in Edwardsville. Flip the Frog at the Moose in Edwardsville on Friday. So a whole lot more going on a Friday night right here in our little area, which we love to call the home of rock and roll, and we have domed at that. And if anyone wants to debate us, we'll have them on the air. Why not? Let's talk about it. We're Chuck Berry, Miles Davis, Bonnie Bramlett, Michael McDonald. I could just go on forever. You listed all the trumpet players.
Yeah, Clark Terry's a big one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of famous people from our area.
Yeah.
And the Bloody Bucket, man. I'd like to go to the Bloody Bucket.
Does that sound
just
like
by the name?
Yeah, well, we love our Grafton.
Yeah.
You talk about a resilient town. They've been through floods, and during the we like to just put up quotes and not mention when everything was shut down again, because we're trying to forget that.
Yes.
During that time frame, right after that happened, a flood came, and so Grafton went through a double whammy there.
Yeah.
And they're back at it once again. So
they're back at it.
They have always been a great destination for musicians. A lot of acoustic acts play there, but they've got places like the Hog Pit that'll rock it out. The Grafton Pub will rock it out.
Yeah.
And so lots of opportunities in the Grafton area, and what a beautiful drive up the River Road. So can't beat that.
Yeah, I've played there. I remember.
Yeah, where'd you play in Grafton?
I wish I could remember the name of the place, but I remember.
One of the wineries, maybe?
No, it was Fantasy Band.
Oh, okay.
I just can't remember where.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know where you're playing August 31st.
Man, we are looking so forward to August 31st. When they called me, I had done the Jazz Festival here a couple times as maybe the opening or the middle guy or the second guy, and I always brought like a trio and me or something. So when they called, well, we want you to be the headliner, I went, oh boy, I can do something I've been wanting to do for a while, and that is we're bringing 8 pieces.
Oh.
So this is kind of fun for me.
Okay.
So I will have a full rhythm section of a bass, piano.
We got to shout out the
drummer.
band. If you can, shout out some names for us.
Yeah, well, we're going to have Randy Bear on the guitar. We're going to have Arthur Toney on the piano, Keith Evans on the drums, and then I bring my favorite horn section, which is Chris Miller on lead trumpet, Larry Johnson, a fantastic saxophone player, and another guy that's done some of our charts, and a fantastic trombone player, Jim Owens. And then I'll be standing in front of that acting like I know what I'm doing while they all make me sound wonderful.
Okay, you threw me a wrench there. You have a lead trumpet player, but you're a trumpet player. Explain what the difference is.
If it kind of goes back to the big band era when you would have 4 trumpet players. So just like in singing, when you have the soprano, alto, tenor, barry, there are 4 trumpet parts. So the first trumpet part would be called the lead trumpet player. And he's the guy that mainly states the melodies.
Okay.
In a big band, I still call him a lead trumpet player because he'll be playing the lead parts behind the soloists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's the same as like singing. So the 3 horns would be, he'd be the lead, he'd be the soprano, the tenor would be the tenor, and the trombone would be the baritone, basically.
All right, so that's the Jim Manley band lineup for the August 31st.
Yes,
Jazz.
we're calling that group, it's never been I don't think it's ever been in print anywhere, but we decided to call it Brass Attitude.
Okay. That worked for me. So Brass Attitude just added to the list. This is an official announcement now.
Yes.
We have put it out right here on Riverbend Talent.
And speaking of some of the music that we will be playing, we have 2 Miles tunes.
Oh, boy.
And ironically, from 2 different eras.
Okay.
We're going to do something off Kind of Blue.
Got to do that.
We got to do it. But we're going to do a little different version of it.
Okay.
And then we're actually doing one of the 80s things.
Okay.
So it's called Jean Pierre. And
something tells me Miles would want you to do something slightly different than his version.
It's very, very different. And we have just a general mix. Again, it's such a big umbrella. We're doing some things that I love to do. We're even going back as far as the 30s with a Benny Goodman tune.
Okay.
So we're going to cover a lot of ground. We got some New Orleans music. Got a lot of different stuff. It's a big umbrella, this jazz umbrella. We're just going to do it with a brass attitude.
The band playing right before you guys, Left of West, they blend funk, rock, and jazz and blues to create a unique sound that is both energetic and soulful. So
I'm looking forward to hearing them.
Yeah, and also playing that night at 6:30, the Alton Jazz Confluence. To kick things off, as the gates open at 6 o'clock, only $10 general admission. There's a $3.50 fee on that. You can get your tickets at Metro Tix. And that's going to be exciting. The Alton Jazz and Wine Fest down at the Amphitheater in Alton, right here in Alton. So I wanted to talk, before I got you out of here, about some of your recordings. It looks like you started back in 1991 with
1991. I did. I recorded.
Did that come out on cassette?
It did come out on cassette.
See, I knew
Honest to God, I think not only did it come out on cassette, it was the first compact disc in St. Louis.
Oh, check that out.
Yeah. I remember the guy saying, we're going to put this out on compact disc. And I went, okay, what is that?
Yeah. Some assembly required.
Some assembly required. Recorded in the end of 90, and I think it came out in 91.
Yeah. Where'd you record that at?
That was at a studio called Music Masters down on the hill.
I remember that.
Yeah, Music Masters, Greg Trampy. And I did several albums there.
Yeah.
At least probably 8 or 9 recordings there over the years.
Yeah. Now I got to ask, is that available still? Can you even find it?
Music Masters?
No. Yeah, the first album.
Oh, you could probably find it for $1 in a used store somewhere. Yes.
Yeah. I love the name of the next album, though, Lip Trip.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you how that came about. That was the guy that produced it. Album was a guy named Scott Allsbach, who grew up in the Illinois area. He was from Red Bud, Illinois originally. He went to school at SIU. He's one of the first guys that got into computer music.
Okay.
In other words, using the computers also to record. And he was a trumpet player. And his parents I did a TV show in 1978 on Channel 9, and it had a big band. Even in 1978, I was a trumpet geek and wanted to have a big band. And I remember we played the theme from Star Wars, and things like that. Very Maynard-ish. And I was at my house, and there's a knock on my door, and it's this guy. "You're going to teach my son to play. We saw you on TV." And his dad was kind of a mafia guy,
Okay.
"You're teaching my son to play." Well, his son fell in love with trumpet, and was a brilliant trumpet player, but he actually injured his neck playing the trumpet, which can be kind of common. So he went another direction, and he ended up being in L.A. and became a big producer. He produced Avril Lavigne's first record, which I think she had 4 or 5 big hits on, and that was him.
Check that out.
He has since got out of this crazy business for reasons that you and I may know.
Right.
And but that album, there were a lot of live players on the Lip Trip album, and a lot of his computer-generated music we wrote together. And he actually came up with the title Lip Trip.
Okay. And that was mid-'90s, so, I mean, the Internet's just getting moving about that time.
Yeah. Well,
just to put everybody in a place there as far as computers go. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that album, it did really well. And I still get people ask me about that record. And it's that long ago.
Yeah.
In my head, it's like 10 years ago, but in essence,
unfortunately, it's not 10 years ago,
it's
buddy.
a long time ago. And so there was a small little label out of Music Masters that I did a couple big band things with, and a smaller 8-piece band. I did a couple recordings on that label, and those records at that time, CDs sold very well. Pre-streaming. So the label was a pretty good deal because they would pay for everything, including the musicians. I would buy the CD from the label for $7.50 and then sell it for $15.
Interesting.
And then when music, we were talking about how people don't realize how dire the music business can be, how it's changed. And I swear, Denny, people are not aware of what happens to you when you put music out now. When iTunes first came on, let's say I like that song off Lip Trip. I'm going to buy that song, and I'm going to pay 99 cents for it. I would get 70 cents of that.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty amazing.
That is pretty
about.
good, actually.
70 cents I would get for a song. Now, if people don't know, with all the streaming, and whether you pay for Spotify or you listen free or any of those musical services, you play that same song, and I get 0.006 of a penny.
I was going to bring up your latest release is Short Stories and Tall Tales Volume 2.
I just released.
And that's the one you're getting like 0.08 off of, right?
0.006 of a penny.
Oh, you're lower than the blood alcohol level.
Yeah, that's bad, isn't it? That's a good phrase. Our payment is lower than the blood alcohol content. Right. I like that.
So yeah, and there you go. What a big change.
It's a huge change. I mean, when we did those albums in Music Masters, I think he'd buy 1,000 to 5,000 at a time, and these things sold overseas and everything. Up until maybe 2 or 3 recordings ago. I'm always recording. It's just something I love.
I was going to say there's at least 15, 20 releases here. Just going through the list real quick.
I think I've lost count, honest to God.
I'm seeing 4 or 5 almost every decade.
Yeah.
So that's whipping them out.
I think I'm on 24 or 5.
Wow.
I believe. I'm not sure. I just released one yesterday.
I was going to say, you really hit it hard about 2014 through now.
Yeah. Well, I recorded home.
The last 10 years,
Well, the technology's changed. Let's say,
right.
I wanted so-and-so to play a bass part. He can live in Hawaii. And I send him the tracks, and he just plays it and sends it over, and I do all the mixing. My guitar player is from San Diego, Jeff Schneider. He plays on a lot of my stuff. I just send them the tracks, and they pop them over.
Right.
It's pretty amazing technology.
Yeah.
And it's cost-effective for a good reason.
Right.
Because you're making 0.006 of a penny on a song sale.
Now, we all know about all the editing and everything you can do nowadays. Are you still old school where you just like to put that track on and let her fly?
I try to record my trumpet parts in one day, so it's pretty much real. I don't change pitches or anything like that.
Right.
I might chop some sections up and move them around, and I might do some editing on the parts that the guys send me. And part of that's the challenge is creating music with new technology.
Right.
People say, well, that's not music.
Exactly.
Well, it is music.
It is music.
Yeah, it's music.
You're still composing.
You're still composing.
You're just using new tools.
And I enjoy that process.
Right. Right. So out of all these albums, do you get a favorite, or are they all your babies?
No, I will say what Maynard said. Oh, the last one.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Now, I guess most of these are available on streaming sites then?
Yeah, everything's most things are up on streaming sites. I don't know if they're all up there because the ones that I did for the label, they own the rights to them. Yeah, but most of mine are up there.
And so if you get on your favorite streaming site and you type in Jim Manley,
you'll either get me or a bluegrass guy. There is a bluegrass guy named Jim Manley, and you will know right away because there's no trumpet on his recordings.
Okay, so you always got a picture of a trumpet or something
Yeah,
in the thumbnail, right?
They'll know it's me.
Okay, yeah, because you can sample most of that and get an idea of. I noticed on your website you've got some places where you can actually purchase the records, and there's a little sample there for that's at jimmanleymusic.com.
That's correct.
Also, where you can get lessons.
My lessons and my calendar's up there.
Your calendar,
where I'm playing.
Which ironically, I seen you had a gig tonight.
I would have been at Rendezvous Wine Bar in O'Fallon, but I subbed it out so I could come and talk to you.
Listen to that.
Yeah.
Now I feel special.
Well, you are special.
I'll tell you what's special. August 31st.
August 31st is going to be a blast.
The Alton Wine and Jazz Festival.
Yes, sir.
Now you're playing late, so you might have a few wines before you go on.
I might have some wines before, during, and after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're an experienced musician. That should put you just about where you need to be.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I only got 3 things to wiggle.
Exactly. It's funny. Before you came in, I was asking some of my coworkers if there's any questions they wanted to ask, and they're like, "Well, look, there's only 3 valves on a trumpet. Does he have to work out?"
Yes, I worked out, and I was in the shape of my life at 7 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
Hasn't changed a bit.
I was told that growing up. You have to be in peak physical condition to play the trumpet, and then I saw my heroes, and not too many of them looked in peak physical condition.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
Now,
point.
Miles was a boxer, so at one time he was in pretty good shape.
Right. And you mentioned before we came on the show, Doc Severinsen. He's in his 90s now.
He is 97, I believe.
Right.
And he was still playing up till his 90s, which is, on trumpet, is very, very rare. It's a very, I don't want to say physical instrument. It's not physical to play. A demanding instrument.
There comes a time when you just run out of wind.
You run out of air.
Yeah.
That's about it. Yeah.
Which is something you can teach. Breathing techniques and different things like that. We didn't even get into that as we're running out of time here. But I was going to compare it a little bit to singing.
Yeah,
and,
very similar.
I know one of the big parts about singing is to know exactly when to take a breath.
Yeah.
And so you don't interrupt the melody.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's very similar to trumpet.
Well, the thing in trumpet, it sounds like it takes an enormous amount of air because it's loud and powerful and brassy. And it's just the opposite. It's very yoga-like.
Okay.
And you want to get your air low so it isn't all backed up in your throat.
Right.
And you're not playing from here.
Which is something I think every musician learns as they go along. At first, they want to go hard.
That's
but
right.
as they continue to play, they realize it takes way less effort than they ever imagined. And I know it was that way for me on guitar. I was pressing down as hard as I could, and it was only slowing me down. Once I learned to loosen up a little bit.
It's a lifetime study.
Yeah.
You know, the great Dizzy Gillespie said it perfectly about trumpet. Some days you win, some days the trumpet wins. In the end, you die and the trumpet wins.
Right,
And
exactly.
that's about the truth.
Beautiful. And excellent way to wrap up this program. And what a delight it's been to talk to Jim Manley, legendary St. Louis music scene trumpet player.
Legendary means you're old.
Right.
That's what that means.
Over 4 decades.
Yeah.
That's
it's actually, I've been
probably
playing 54
5 now.
years.
Okay.
Yeah, 54 years. But who's counting?
Right. And we hope everybody enjoyed listening in to Jim's history and Miles Davis's history and everybody's history. I think we covered the gamut,
'em.
and that's what jazz is all about, right?
That's right.
We can go any direction. We're ready. Just, let us know.
Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
All right. Just a little nod and, go up or down and a little hand signature and, something else is happening, right?
That's right.
Maybe shout out a key change or something.
Something. Anything. Any kind of look.
Right? Yeah. So you can catch all that on August 31st right here at our amphitheater. Jim Manley, the headliner for the Alton Wine. Well, let's call it the Alton Jazz and Wine Fest.
Yeah. I don't know what the real name
I think
is.
it is jazz and wine. I've been saying wine and jazz because
you have your priorities.
Well, I'm going to be in the audience that night, so there you go. So, yeah, only $10 for general admission. They do have $25 tables you can get, but you got to fill those up, and of course that's including fees. So get out there to Ticketmaster, get your tickets while they last because they're going quick, from what we understand, and. Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to JimManleyMusic.com.
Thank you, sir.
That is your brand, I guess is what the kids call it.
That's my brand, yes.
Remember when you used to have that on AOL?
Yeah.
Right, back in the day,
right.
you get the little thing in the mailbox, right?
Yeah.
He's been playing since before the internet, guys. That's true. All right,
I didn't
Jim.
think about it that way.
Yeah.
That is true.
Just wanted to put that in your bucket there.
Yeah.
Your bloody bucket.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, it's been a blast, and unfortunately we've got to run, but reminder to everybody, if they want to know what's going on around the river bend, I just barely scratched the surface. I didn't even get to Saturday's list here that's over 6 pages and available at cottonmouth.org. We want to thank our sponsors once again, the Alton Music Company, who's taught millions of kids how to play trumpets over the years. And that reminds me, one thing I wanted to bring up. We've got a local artist in town, okay? His name is, he goes by Coolaverse, okay? And his name's Michael Snyder, and he's got this idea. He's trying to collect 1,000 trumpets.
Wow.
To build a statue of Miles Davis out of the trumpets.
Wow.
Any advice on how he could find 1,000 trumpets?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure there's some in people's closet that has been touched for years.
Right.
They're out there.
Right?
They're out there.
So it's possible. You think
It is possible.
He wants to do it by the anniversary, which isn't far away, if I remember.
I was going to say, that's coming up probably pretty quick.
Yeah. So
That's a lot of trumpets.
okay, I just had to put that out there for Coolaverse, who might be listening in, and he's still
I
trying
know
to get
most of the trumpet players that turn them into lamps and stuff.
Right.
When they're not.
Well, he could take a lamp and put that in the statue.
That's right.
Rearrange it. He really wants to try to keep them intact without, bending them in different directions and that kind of thing. So
this is quite a challenge.
It is. So you can drop them off at the conservatory if you got a trumpet you'd like to donate to the Coolaverse cause. Thanks again, Jim.
Yeah, thank you.
Check him out once again, August 31st, Jazz and Wine Fest right at the amphitheater. In the meantime, everybody, get out there and support local music and art.